So another thing that I'm going to talk about really briefly is the college admissions process, and basically what you should be working on if you do want to go to a community college or a technical school or a university, any of those. There's a bunch of things that factor into university decisions, and they definitely vary by tier. So if you're looking to get into like an Ivy League, that's going to be a lot different than if you're looking to go to, a community college or even a state school, even some of the very good state schools. The admissions process is just necessarily different. So this is probably going to be fairly general, just things that you need to be working on if that is your goal to get in to university or college somewhere at some point. So in my previous videos I've talked about like the importance of getting on your teacher's good sides. Not only because they control your grades and because they can be really interesting to talk to actually, but also because you are going to need letters of recommendation. Like, this goes for pretty much everyone. I think if you're trying to apply anywhere, they ask for a letter of recommendation from someone, and usually a teacher or someone who knows you in the community. So, honestly, the letter of recommendation can be that thing that really distinguishes you from other students. If you can, you really do want to get like a stellar letter of recommendation because they can provide insights to the school that honestly no one else can. And it's kind of interesting that in an online school, I think you actually have more potential for your teachers to say like amazing things about you. Because if you really reach out to your teachers and do really well in the course, or even just work really hard in the course, that sets you aside from a lot of the other students in a virtual kind of environment. Like, just as an example, my chemistry teacher last year, this one kid, and I love my chemistry teacher, we talk a lot, and this one kid called her every single weekday, the entire year. Not in honors chem, not in AP chem, just like standard chem, just like wanted to talk about chemistry every single day, or had a question or something. And even though they weren't the strongest kid in the class, they weren't like even nearly towards the top, the teacher just loved her because no one does that. Like, no one does that. So if you can set yourself apart like that, do. Like, it does take some amount of effort, but it's not like rocket science or anything. Like, you don't need to be this like brilliant person to go and call your teachers and make them like you. So if you can do that, you should probably do that. Summers are also a really big thing, like what you do with your summers. This becomes more important, honestly, when you're looking to apply to more selective universities, because at that level, it's kind of an expectation that you do something academic with your summers. Whether that be just taking summer courses, or going and doing like a program at a university for high school students over the summer, or even like an independent project. Like, people weigh independent projects really heavily, and that's kind of the other thing, is that it does help in some capacity, just because everyone does it, to have like a laundry list of activities. Like, you hear kids talking all the time probably about like, oh, I'm the president of Key Club, or Debate Club, or Youth and Government Club, and like that's like the classic leadership role kind of thing that people like to play up. But what tends to happen is that kids sign up for all these activities and then don't care about any of them. What it helps to do is to sign up for lots of activities but then care about at least one of them. Honestly, it probably helps you more to sign up for a bunch and care about just one or two and really pour your time and effort into those clubs or those competitions or whatever, than to sign up for a bunch of them and either not do anything, or sign up for a bunch of them and then kind of like spread yourself too thin. So don't try and be like the captain of everything. There's this quote like, you should know something about everything and everything about something. I really like that because I think it really describes like the philosophy here of you should be really intensely into a few things, even if it's just like a personal interest. Like, don't let people trivialize your personal interests. They can weigh really heavily in the college admissions process. You don't have to be like an Olympian or anything crazy. It's really just how passionate you are about certain things. Anything, really. And that weighs really, really heavily. So, yeah, the laundry list of things helps, but being super interested in something, and honestly very communicative about it, like, if you can describe to people in like a minute what you're really interested in and what you're doing in that field or whatever, it's really impressive. And I should probably actually link, Harvard Business School has this website where you can go through and create your elevator pitch, which is basically what I just said. Like, if you were an entrepreneur and you had like a business idea, would you be able to describe what you're doing and like sell it in 30 seconds or a minute? And it's a really good exercise, actually. Like, it sounds really stupid, and it is on some level, but that is really important if you can do that. And along those same lines, if the college or university or wherever that you're applying to does interviews, do it. But don't just do it, like, do it really well. Interview really well. You should, I think, learn to interview as best as possible. Not just, like, in a formulaic kind of way, like, give them the answers that they want to hear, but just to be able to express yourself. And that's, like, so cliche. That's such a cliche phrase, but it's true. To be able to, like, express what you've been doing and what you're really interested in as a person. Like, not just as a student applying to the university or to a job or whatever, but as a person, because that gives them insight into how you approach problems and how you think about things. And in the greater scheme of things, that matters a lot more than how you answered, whatever questions they may have asked you about their specific company or anything, or university, or program or anything. So the other big thing is like work experience or volunteer experience. Everyone really drums those two things up, and if you have those, that's great. I would tell you definitely to get volunteer experience. Like, when people say volunteer experience, like, where do you volunteer? What do you do? I think everyone almost automatically thinks like soup kitchen, homeless shelter, things like that. And those are great. And if you're interested in that, go for it and go help people. That's awesome. But if you're not so into that, if that just feels like a time sink to you, and it does to some people, I mean, that sounds terrible, but it's not. You understand. There's a whole bunch of things that you can do in basically anything that you're interested in. You can go and volunteer, especially online. Like, there are so many online communities that you can volunteer for, and none of them sound less impressive to anyone just because they're online. So go and do that. Like, if you're interested in something, go find a community that you can join and contribute to. Even if it's just like discussions, but especially if they have like organizational projects and things like that. It can really help. And just think outside of the box a little bit with volunteering, because it doesn't have to be, homeless shelters and soup kitchens if you don't want it to be. Of course, the things that people always throw out are like what your grades are and standardized tests, which everyone ever hates. I'm probably gonna do a whole nother video on grades, just because the grading system at Connections isn't really different from from physical high schools in general, but it is specific. So I'm probably gonna go through how to jack up your GPA and how to get good grades just overall. Things you can do, even though I covered that a little bit in my Getting Started video. And I'm definitely going to do one on standardized tests, especially the college entry ones, like the SAT, the ACT, which I'm only going to cover briefly because my only comment on the ACT is basically take the SAT instead. So I'm going to cover those two topics separately, and probably AP tests as well under the standardized test canopy. But just to touch on them briefly here, grades are really important. And I know everyone says that, and I wish I could say that they weren't, but they're probably the most important part of your application. And it sucks because you can have grades that are subpar and still be an amazing person and still have so much potential. Like, honestly, personally, I think grades are like a very weak predictor of future success. And the same thing definitely goes for standardized tests. Like, everyone all the time always either talks about how like they had an amazing score and now they feel like a genius, or like they had a bad score and now they feel stupid. And so the thing that gets tossed around a lot is, whether or not standardized tests are a good prediction of future success or of intelligence, and my personal stance is absolutely not. And I think that educational research kind of backs me up on that. They're a pretty weak indicator, honestly, of what you're actually capable of. And what they do demonstrate is pretty much how good you are at gaming the test. And so that's pretty much what you have to focus on, is honestly, and it's so sad, but it's not actually learning the material that you're being tested on. It's just, how well can I game this given my resources and time and whatever else. And so, yeah, I mean, it's kind of unfortunate that grades are weighted so heavily in the admissions process, but they are. And you should strive to get the best grades you can as a result of that if you do want to go to university. But no one has a cutoff. Like, no one sees a D or a C or one bad grade or whatever you would qualify as a bad grade and be like, well, they're out now. No one does that. But unfortunately, as you get into the more selective tiers, you have to realize, like, schools like Harvard get, like, 35,000 applications every single year. And they have to use some metric to weed those applications out and minimize them down to a pool where, like, you can actually have human readers read the application and judge it kind of subjectively. So they do have to use, like, a number metric at some point. It's not a hard cutoff, but again, getting the best grades that you can is really important. Standardized test scores, I'm happy to say, are less important in the college and university admissions process. And every single admissions officer that I've ever talked to has agreed with that. That's not a controversial statement at all. But unfortunately, they do still matter. Especially as virtual school students, it doesn't really harm us that we've gone to a virtual school as long as it's accredited. I'm pretty sure Connections Academy is accredited in every single state, so it's never really been that much of a problem for students coming out of CA. They've gotten students into, like, Harvard, Berkeley, other kinds of Tier 1 and Ivy League schools, Cornell. I've known, like, 2 students at my school who've gone to Cornell. So it's not impossible, and it's actually fairly common. So it doesn't really count against you, but it is important, especially for us, to get good standardized test scores. They don't have to be incredible. Like, they don't have to be, like, number 1 in the country or state or region or anything, but they do have to be, and again, it depends on what tier you're looking to apply to, but it's generally a good idea if they're right around the national average. So for math, that's about 515. For writing and reading, I believe it's around 525, something like that. Or 500, actually, because they're lower than math. They've dropped recently, so about 500. But it's right around there. So if you can meet that, that's great. And if you can go beyond that, that's even better. But just remember that your standardized test scores are absolutely not a measure of how well you understand the material, or how smart you are, or how successful you're going to be. And that's not just like me, a bitter student, telling you this. Like, educational research has said this. And I think people in general will pretty overwhelmingly agree that at the very most, the SATs and other kinds of college admissions tests are like very, very weak benchmarks. But unfortunately, they do still factor in, much less so than grades. In some cases, less so than extracurriculars. Like I said, if you can get like an individual project or an independent project or even a group project, just something that you dedicate yourself to, and like whip that out for the admissions process people, that really helps you. The essay is another really important part, and I would encourage you to like improve your writing skills. Just to like include they call it a personal voice, like basically your personality. And it's so important, like if you Google things, and this is why like I really try never to Google things about the college admissions process. I prefer to like talk to actual admissions officers themselves, because when you Google, you get like sites like College Confidential that will tell you that like a 2350 on the SAT is too low, out of a 2400, of course. And it's absurd. And they'll also tell you like, you know, pick out a great work of literature and quote mine it for your essay and just make it sound really inspirational and educated. And that might be the right approach for you if you're like really into theater, and pick something from Shakespeare and talk about how it's important from you, or for you rather. But if you're not like that, and I'm pretty sure most people aren't, that's not what you should be doing. And I'm not one to tell you what you should be doing, so like I can't tell you here's what you do. But people want to force your application into like this little box to make it perfect. And the problem with that is that everyone forces their application into a little box to make it perfect. So what happens is when the college gets those kinds of like packaged, formulaic applications, it's like everyone else's. Like they tried to stand out by making it perfect, but they actually made themselves part of the crowd by trying to be perfect. So, and I know like just be yourself sounds really cliche, but that's kind of what you have to do. Like, I've known people who have like cursed all throughout their college application in the essay portion, just because like that's what they normally do. And I'm not saying like curse indiscriminately if that's what you do, which is what I do. But you know, put emphasis where it needs to be, and do try and write your personality into what the essay is. They want to hear about your frustrations, as small as they may seem. They just, yeah, I mean, the admissions panels really do want an idea of who the student who's applying is. And so if you can work on sort of developing that personal voice, do that. I guess I don't really have many pieces of advice on how to go about doing that. AP English classes really help. AP English language and specifically really helps with that. AP English literature is also pretty great because you end up just writing a lot, but that one is more specifically like critiquing works of literature rather than like improving your writing. AP English language is all about like improving your writing. So yeah, I would do that if you can, if you're willing to sign up for an AP course. The only thing I'll say about that is that AP English courses are probably among the hardest, not in terms of like getting a good grade, but just in that they are a time sink. They are a big time sink. I haven't yet taken one, but I am right now, and just looking at the syllabus, I can tell you it's a big time sink. That being said, especially if you're looking into getting into one of the really selective universities, your writing is really important. Just being able to express your thoughts clearly, especially like even just formatting it so that it's fluent, that's really important. So if you can improve your writing, do that. I'll stop ranting about that now. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that's like super important that's sticking out in my mind. Like, you don't need to hold down a job. That's one of the things that people like throw out is, oh, you need job experience, and no, you don't. But if you're not going to have a job, definitely, like I said, work on projects. Like, work on something that speaks to you and that is like your own interest, because people really weigh that heavily. They really look for that, because like no one does that. Everyone has work experience because everyone's always been told that they need work experience. And volunteer in certain activities that interest you. Like I said, it doesn't have to be, a homeless shelter or a soup kitchen if that's not your thing. There's a lot of different things that you can do, and thinking outside of the box can really benefit you. So those are probably the basics for the college admissions process, everything that you need to do. The only difference really, or the only other thing rather, is that you should take the PSAT. I would recommend. I mean, it's not necessary, but you can qualify for the National Merit Scholarships in junior year of high school. And you can start taking them, like people start taking them in middle school, which I think is ridiculous. Personally, I had the opportunity to take it in sophomore year, and I decided not to because it was making me anxious. So if you have anxiety issues, you may find that it actually helps you to take it earlier so that you know what it is when it doesn't really matter. Because in junior year it does matter if you're looking to aim for that like national merit scholarship kind of thing. And that's the only year that you're eligible for that. So take it earlier if you want to, but you don't have to take it at all, ever. Most people do because it's a pretty good precursor to the SAT. And it gives you that kind of like tested environment, and it doesn't factor in really at all in college admissions, so it gives you a nice practice if you want to do that. I'd recommend it, but again, you don't have to. And, oh, right, the other thing is course load. I forgot to mention this when I was talking about grades. Course load is so important, and this is actually what reminded me. I just got an ask that said, if you have more credits, will colleges like you more? And the answer to that is no. I mean, the fact that you've taken a lot of courses is great, but definitely don't sacrifice time just doing like academic stuff in school when you can be working on your own stuff that you can pull out and impress people with. And it's really much better to take harder courses than more courses. So unless there's a reason why you specifically need more credits, definitely opt for harder courses over just more. If you want to learn about art, or if you want to learn about music or some elective like that, and you're thinking of stacking it on as a credit, if that comes at the expense of not taking an AP course, or even an honors course or something like that, I would say don't take the elective. Go learn about the elective independently, because then you can pull that out and be like, it wasn't going to be the best choice for me to take this in school, so I went and learned about it on my own and took a harder course. Like, that just sounds really good. So it's kind of like gaming the system like that and setting yourself up in such a way that it's kind of strategic how you have to play it. But that's kind of the nature of college admissions. It's kind of a crapshoot. So, yeah, that's kind of just an overview. I'm not sure if it's worth doing a video on, like, just Tier 1 expectations. This one covers, the video that, I'm doing right now, covers, pretty much everything but Tier 1 pretty well. It covers even Tier 1 pretty well, but, when you really start getting into the more selective schools, it helps to know, like, what the SAT benchmarks are, what the grade benchmarks are, what your course load needs to look like for different kinds of majors. I know what your course list should look like optimally if you're going into engineering, because that's what I'm looking to do. And I can probably give you some guidance with other sorts of course loads for other kinds of majors too. So let me know if anyone's interested in that. I'm probably definitely going to do another one on grades and how to get good grades, especially at Connections Academy. And standardized tests, because that's like a personal pet peeve of mine, is the misconceptions that people have about how important standardized tests are or what they indicate. and also how that plays into like self-esteem and anxiety, because I see all the time kids who are like really upset or really proud of their scores, and there's nothing wrong with being proud of a good score, but along that same line, there should be other things that you should be more proud of, not just this number that doesn't really describe much about you. So yeah, personal opinion, but research, fuck yeah.